Hi, I'm Patrick Giguere with Cosmic Alchemist Astrology, and welcome to this video. So, this video I'm calling the Great Junk Food Shortage of the 2020s. I'm making this video because a lot of people in my circles are they're thinking about this possibility of like a massive food shortage and like a situation where the whole infrastructure grid falls apart and we're basically like back to the 1800s at least. And really to be to the point, I'm not seeing that scenario. I'm not seeing like a mass starvation event. This is a legitimate concern because I don't want to trivialize this. Not having food is a very legitimate concern. It's not just scary, it's freaky as shit. So I don't want to trivialize people's concerns. I just want to lend my perspective. And this topic of potential food shortages fits into the context of the times right now. So I'm going to make my best effort to tie this all together and put it into the big picture of what we've been going through. So, first thing I have to say, I see the 2020s as a decade of like mind games and like rent-a-scares and really massive hype. And hype and fear and scares, this is how a small group of people controls the world basically. And they use media to do it because it's such a prolific mouthpiece. It goes everywhere and so many people hear it. And it actually programs people's mindsets and moods. That's why it's called television programming for so many years. One of the other things going on right now with this alleged Russian invasion of Ukraine, I talk to, Americans, people who live in my local area. They haven't given a shit. They didn't give a shit for 20 years that there was a ridiculous, pretty illegal war in Afghanistan that didn't meet any of its stated objectives. And it was a big money maker. They really didn't give a shit that people were dying there. Americans, Afghans, American allies, foreign Islamic fighters, they really didn't give a shit. But now that the news is framing this whole Ukraine thing in, a certain light, now all these Americans who normally don't give a shit about war, who are like watching sports, getting a buzz on, drooling about sports cars, now they're like, oh, I think this is World War III, I think this is the big one. While the president of Ukraine basically addresses all of the slimy U.S. intelligence agencies and says, could you show me some proof that the Russians are about to invade? I haven't seen any. So, and this is just like the virus. This is just like the solution to the virus, the experimental injection. The 2020s, it's going to be one thing after another that's like a big scare. It's a big scare that distracts the people from what's going on. It benefits people in power, and it never pans out to the intensity that we thought. That's just going to be this decade. And going back to the Ukraine thing, there's also this fear of, world war and a big bloodbath. And people who follow my channel, you hear me talking about how the planetary cycles that kick-started the American Revolution, the Civil War, and World War II will all be recurring between 2024 and 2026. People hear me talking about this. And the first place people's minds go, which I don't blame them for, is that there's going to be some big massive bloodbath. It's going to be like 3 wars in one. Well, I have to tell you, World War III is already going on. It's a mental and it's a spiritual war. And the new American Revolution is going to be the same thing. They're going to be physical manifestations. I think this country, America, is going to split up. I think other countries are going to split. Some very physical, tangible things will happen, but I'm not seeing the bloodbath. I'm not seeing the whole bloodbath factor out of any of this. This decade started with the whole scamdemic, and that really set the tone for the decade. So you still have to use your common sense, you have to be smart, you have to take care of yourself, but really the survival skill for this decade is discernment. It's not so much being able to go pick, berries and roots out in the woods and live out in the woods indefinitely, or, shoot everyone who comes across your path. Those aren't the survival skills. Those can be good skills, but yeah, not seeing the 2020s as a bloodbath decade, and more importantly, not as a mass starvation decade. I'm not seeing it. So that's why I call it the junk food shortage, the great junk food shortage. Because what we're really seeing with food shortages here is we're seeing the middle aisles of the supermarket. So what do I mean by that? A good bit of healthy advice when it comes to shopping at a supermarket is to shop around the perimeter. So around the perimeter of the supermarket, you've got the produce section. A lot of the time supermarkets will put the organics and the natural foods there. You get the dairy aisle, which has some good stuff. For me, I like the almond milks, things like that. I don't go for the pasteurized cow milks. And they get some decent cheeses. And then on the outside too, you usually have your bread aisle, which you get some good organic breads, like Ezekiel breads, or just some regular breads that are just organic. And the bakery can have decent stuff, and then you've got your your meat and your fish section. You can get some good wild stuff, some good organic stuff. That's primarily where I shop. Now, the middle aisles of the supermarket, that's where all the junk food is. You got Chef Boyardee, you got Pop-Tarts, chips, shitty sugary tooth-rotting breakfast cereals. What else? Frozen pizzas, TV dinners. You got all the crap. You got all the... You just have all the junk that passes for food in America or Canada, as all this crap that passes for food in the Western world. That's what's in the middle aisles. It's all the shit that it won't only kill you, but it'll embalm you. Because there's so many preservatives in food now. I have an astrology client who's a mortician, and he's like, yeah, there's so many preservatives now in people, you really don't have to embalm them a whole lot. They're walking around preserved already. So, middle aisles, junk food, total crap, no good for your health. Point is, that's where we're seeing the food shortages. It's like, oh, Chef Boyardee beefaroni isn't coming in on the ships from China, I don't know where the hell they can that stuff, but to all these middle aisle crappy foods, there's always something imported that is missing, and the whole thing, it breaks the whole chain down to put these foods together. I shop at Trader Joe's, it's like they don't have coconut oil because the coconut oil comes from near the equator. It comes from the tropics, from Costa Rica, Indonesia, Thailand, places like that, India. So, and there's a lot of games going on with the supply chain. You just have ships sitting out in the ocean ready to deliver their cargoes, but you take a place like California. The unions, the longshoremen's unions, so longshoremen are the guys that run all the cranes and stuff at the seaports to unload the ships. The longshoremen's unions and the politicians are all backed and funded by them and controlled by them, basically the mafia. And I'm not talking like Italian mobsters, but I'm talking like big business people who contribute to political campaigns. They're really the organized crime are high-level business people that sit on the boards of corporations. So there are a lot of games going on with supply chains. So it's like there's not really a food shortage. It's just the food is like misappropriated. It's like, if you use an extreme example, you use like the Irish famine in the 1840s. You can look it up that there was all kinds of food being being exported out of Ireland that whole time, like pigs, cows, wheat, corn, barley, whatever. You name a food, Ireland was growing and exporting it, but the farmers weren't allowed to touch it because the landlords owned it. You know, the Anglo-Irish landlords. So, yeah. A lot of games going on. So the food's there, it just can't get to where it's going. And again, this is breaking down the junk food supply, the frozen pizzas, the Pop-Tarts, the Cheetos, the Hawaiian Punch, you know, you name it. But pretty much the healthy food is untouched. It's affecting the meat too, but less so the organic stuff. So it's the great junk food shortage of the 2020s. Now, those are my intuitions, you know. When I look at, say, like the placement of like Pluto can bring about some mega death. So like, what was it, late 90s? I want to say 98 through like 2005, 2006. Pluto was in Scorpio. When Pluto's in Scorpio, really serious shit happens. So you had the war on terror. You had like 2 million deaths in Iraq, probably 1 million in Afghanistan. You had the big tsunami in the Indian Ocean, and a bunch of dirty wars all around the world. You had a lot of, that was kind of a mega death, almost decade in there. And then too, if you get Saturn and Pluto and Scorpio, I mean, that's some really serious shit. And that's not going to happen for a long time. I'm talking over 100 years. Yeah, probably better part of 200. So, yeah, just not bloodbath times. Not megadeath times by my reckoning. But I do want to look at some solar eclipses in 2020. Well, one in 2023, one in 2024. Because they speak to this whole thing around food and food production. Because Virgo deals with digestion, the stomach, the intestines, you know, the guts. And Virgo deals with food and food production. So, you know, let's look at these. So we're going to have these eclipses in Virgo because eclipses are all about the karmic axis. So in Western astrology, they call these the nodes of the moon. In Vedic astrology, what I'm doing, we call these nodes RAHU and KETU. RAHU is the head of the dragon or the head of the serpent. KETU is the tail of the dragon. They always sit in opposite signs. This is why eclipses happen 6 months apart. Because the sun, which takes a full year to go around the zodiac relative to Earth, it takes a full year to go around. So if it has an eclipse at one date, it's going to happen about 6 months later. Because it takes 365 days to apparently go around the zodiac. So, yeah. So these nodal points, these in the nodes, Rahu and Ketu, the dragon's head and dragon's tail, they deal with karma. So this karma sets the themes for the eclipses and what events these eclipses will kind of herald. I don't want to say bring, but they herald these events. So in November 19th, 2023, Ketu goes to Virgo, Rahu goes to Pisces. The Ketu in Virgo is what we're concerned with. So, Ketu, the south node, the dragon's tail, this shadow planet, this karmic point, is responsible for releasing things, for cutting things away, for losses. And this all happens to bring about a sense of spiritual liberation, to free us from our illusions, for one. So that opposite karmic point, Rahu, the head of the dragon, Rahu is illusions. And, you know, illusions sort of give us our desires, they fuel our desires. But what we're looking at are these eclipses, these solar eclipses where KETU, the south node, the tail of the dragon, is in the mix. It's all about releasing illusions, releasing falsehoods, cutting away attachments. So, yeah, so November 19th, KETU goes to Virgo, but on October the 12th, 2023, there is going to be a solar eclipse close by. It's going to be at 26 degrees of Virgo. So in a solar eclipse, when the sun and moon come together to create a solar eclipse on October 12th, 2023 at 26 degrees of Virgo, KETU is only 4 degrees away. It's at 0 degrees of Libra. So, but it's still, because again, these nodal points are the shadows that cause the eclipse. So on October the 12th, 2023, solar eclipse, sun and moon will come together with the shadow KETU at 26 degrees of Virgo. This will be in the constellation CHITRA, the jewel. And even though KETU is going to be at 0 degrees of Libra, it's only 4 degrees from where sun and moon are meeting. And they're all in a smaller constellation that is partly in Virgo, partly in Libra, called CHITRA. CHITRA is the jewel. It's all about creating valuable things. It's like the skill of the hands. So it's a very auspicious, kind of benevolent star that gives blessings. Now there's a very powerful fixed star right nearby at 29 degrees of Virgo, and again, solar eclipse point is 26 degrees. So it's within 3 degrees. Fixed stars have like a 3-degree orb, so on either side of the star within 3 degrees, it affects planets near there. So it's right on the margin. And this fixed star is called SPICA. Symbol is an ear of wheat. So this is the star of the grain harvest. And it removes scarcity. That's important. Removes scarcity. The symbol is an image of a man laden with merchandise. So he's carrying, a bunch of produce, a bunch of food to bring to market. But this SPICA, this star of the grain harvest, very benevolent, very good star. It's one of the good stars. There's not many of them according to, this Arabian astrology. So it's one of the benevolent stars. It's a provider of material needs. And a big thing with SPICA is like, we reap what we sow. And there's this whole thing about like, thieves don't do well with SPICA. So what this means is that it's like, if you're in the habit of reaping and consuming what you haven't sown, then this star of the grain harvest, will sort of give you a haircut, will make you deal with less. And I think that's an important theme that's been unacknowledged in the Western world. It's like, you walk into a supermarket and there's just like every type of food, and it's like, it's overwhelming. And it's just kind of crazy, while people in a lot of places like barely have anything to eat. So I'm all for capitalism, but we've been living in excess for a long time, especially since the end of World War II. I always tell people we've been living in a theme park since 1945, and we don't really know it. So I think we have a lot of excess, and it's not bad that we have a lot, but as a group, as a society, we throw a lot away. So that has to be remedied. And everything that's been happening since 2020, it's all about, from a divine perspective, from an evolutionary perspective, it's all about rebalancing the world. So, yeah, we're going to have some scarcities. It's like, there's going to be less meat, but, as an acupuncturist, I always tell people eat too much damn meat. Unless you're a lumberjack, busting ass and cutting trees down and hauling trees, your body can't digest more than 4 ounces of beef. So you get refuse sitting in your gallbladder and your colon. So it's like, having a 20-ounce steak just because you want it. 1, it's excessive. 2, it makes you fat. 3, it makes you unhealthy. 4, it fills your colon with refuse. 5, you just don't need it. Have 2, 3, 4 ounces, enjoy it, don't gobble it, actually chew it. You'll get something out of it, and you'll be leaner. I mean, think of how many big old boys you know who like eat prime ribs. They don't look too healthy. So this is all about getting real. This isn't about starving. So we're going to have the junk food shortage. Again, the food in the middle aisles. And then the meat aisle isn't going to be so full. But do you really need, do you, and let's say you have a family. Do you and your spouse and your 2 children, do you eat that whole pork shoulder? Or does a lot of it get fed to the dog or just kind of get thrown out because the kids don't want to eat all the fatty pieces on it? You know what I mean? So we kind of have to get real and get a concept of what we want versus what we need. And that's a big thing in modern America, in the modern Western world. We can't tell wants and needs apart. We've become collectively we've become very spoiled. And so, when we can't have what we want right away, exactly like we want it, we have freakouts. But we kind of have to, we got to grow up in that department. So, the other eclipse I want to talk about, it's almost a year later. So, the next October, 2024, the sun's going to come back to Virgo. Sun and moon will conjunct again in Virgo, and they'll meet up with KETU again. So KETU, south node of the moon, dragon's tail. It's the karma of letting things go, of losses, of letting go of attachments, and of liberation from said attachments. So yeah, the giant 20-ounce steaks, that's an unneeded attachment. It's nice. Hell, it's like you make your money, you spend it on what you want, but you have to think about how just monoculture and just really unethical, just cruel farming works. The way animals are brutalized, it's like, well, those animals need to be treated well more than you need to eat an entire 20-ounce steak. And, really, steak, it should all be a lot more expensive than it is. If it was organic, if it was pasture raised, if the animals were treated well, it would be a hell of a lot more expensive, so we would eat smaller portions. It's a funny thing actually you can look at is you look at Norway during World War II when it was occupied by the military of the Third Reich of Nazi Germany. They took all of the meat production in Norway to give. The Germans took it from the Norwegians to give to the German military. So there was like no beef and pork in Norway. Beef, pork, lamb, there was none of that stuff in Norway for the whole war. And there was like no heart disease because people, weren't eating it. And I'm not saying don't eat meat. I like meat sometimes, but I eat a hell of a lot less than I used to. I've been doing a little experiment for a few months and it's changed my body a lot, so I don't know. Something different works for everyone, but we're definitely excessive, and we need to think about more ethical farming, safer farming, more humane farming. So anyway, let's get to that other eclipse. So a year later, October 2nd, 2024, Sun goes back to Virgo as another solar eclipse. So this one takes place at 15 degrees of Virgo. It's in the constellation of HASTA. The symbol is a helping hand, can be a fist. HASTA is the dispeller of ignorance. So this is an interesting one. Now, right at that 15 degrees of Virgo, right where Sun and Moon are going to meet up to cause that solar eclipse, you got a fixed star called VINDEMATRIX. So VINDEMATRIX, matrix is like, it means like, the lady. It's like the corresponding word for master, master and mistress, so matrix. So it's like the lady of grapes, or the great harvestress. Harvestress is a weird word. I like the lady of grapes, the harvester of grapes, And so yeah, this is another star that deals with like the harvest of food. And so it's not like a great benevolent star like SPICA that I was talking about. Really what it does is it deals with like scandals, lies, thievery. So at this time we could see the information coming out about how the whole supply chain has been getting tampered with to create food shortages and fears and panics and all that stuff. Now this is a star, because it's Virgo, it helps with mental concentration. Virgo is always about careful, detailed thinking. But you can do that too much. Now an interesting thing is that this solar eclipse, this one in October 2024, is conjunct Mercury. So one of the things about this is if Mercury is conjunct this star, it's like it can create nervous irritability and like depressive moods and like obsessiveness. So yeah, I think people are this is going to highlight how people have been very nervous and irritable and depressed and, you know, feeling like kind of some despair about about what they perceive the food situation to be. But you know, I think this is more about information about how we've been getting played coming out. So yeah, I don't see the famine. Now with that, you know, it is wise to prep. It's wise to have a pantry. It's wise to store food, because people did it for a long time, because hiccups in, you know, food production and harvests happen, and it's good to have something to fall back on. So I don't discourage anyone from doing that, but I would say just remember, this decade it started as a big hype, a time of hype and a time of fear and a time of manufactured fear. So keep that in mind through all this. Now, I think evolutionarily, I think the good that's going to come out of all this business with the food supply chain is that people are going to learn how to garden again. People are going to eat healthier. They're going to make healthier choices. We're going to look at more ethical, humane farming. And, God, what was the other thing? Oh, and we're just going to learn how to store food. So, I think I said we're going to eat healthier. But a lot of good things are going to come out of this increased awareness. That did lead to some fear. But I guess a small price to pay to, you know, have a bit of an alarm, like a false alarm. You know, because again, the C virus and the whole scamdemic created a lot of hype and false fear for the benefit of drug companies, drug pushers. In the midst of all that, a lot of people got a lot healthier. They adopted healthier lifestyles, healthier habits. So these things always come together. You know, you take the good with the bad. That's just kind of the way of it here in the 3D. So I think I've said everything I want to say. But yeah, the great junk food shortage of the 2020s. I don't know, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Anything could happen. You know, run this through your common sense check. Run this through your gut feeling. See what you think. But stars and planets. You know, the hand of God written in the sky. It's one of the only objective truths there is what the sky looks like. So yeah. I mean, I'll admit it, you know, I'm some weird guy looking at stars, and not a lot of people are, you know, justifiably ready to accept astrology, you know, kind of as we astrologers present it. But really, life can be, I guess reading the signs in nature can be a really simple thing. You know, it's like with produce, how when you want to make a body part or an organ system healthier, you eat a food that looks like it. So walnuts look like brains, Broccoli looks like the airways in your lungs. Tomatoes, when you cut a tomato, it looks like the chambers of a heart. You know, you can go on and on like this with foods. So when it comes to food, it's like the 3D world is designed so it's like if you've got the intelligence of like Forrest Gump, you can know what to eat to stay healthy if somebody teaches you. So it's like this with the sky. You know, you wouldn't have to be all that intelligent, but if from childhood you were raised to look up there and know all the stories of the planets and the stars and what that means when they come together, you know, you'd be like Forrest Gump. You'd be like, my mom always said, when, you know, it's really simple stuff, but it's not the most logical thing. You know, the sky is the projection of what's going on within us, what's going on within our human world. And then we are a projection of what's going on in the sky. It's, you know, it's a relationship of the macrocosm and the microcosm. It's basically, it's the hologram. You know, everything is tied together and there are signs and symbols everywhere. So, that's what I think. You know, there is a scientific basis for it, but, you know, we have to explore it. So anyway, that's that. You know, stay frosty. Pay attention, but I don't see the big famines coming. But people are justifiably concerned about what's going on because in the West here we've lived off the fat of the earth for a long time. The fat of the earth has been at our fingertips at every waking moment, and there's been a hiccup in that, and it gets a little freaky. So that's my take on it. See how you feel. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good one.